When Sydney Sweeney steps onto the stage of the Jack Palmer show, the audience erupts. It's her first interview since being announced as the new lead in the upcoming Eden film. Beside her sits Keanu Reeves, calm as always, quietly observing. But host Jack Palmer isn't there to celebrate. He's there to provoke, to belittle, and to turn the interview into a spectacle of arrogance masked as humor. What Jack doesn't realize is that in just a few minutes, the one left speechless won't be Sydney. It'll be him. And what Keanu says that night, no one will ever forget. Before we continue this story, let us know where you're watching from. And if you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another special story for you. The studio felt like it was holding its breath. Spotlights cut through a dark, polished stage, gliding across a sea of faces packed tight into every seat. The audience buzzed with that unique mix of curiosity and suspicion, the kind you feel right before a scandal breaks or a legacy is rewritten. A low hum of suspense pulsed beneath the noise. On the massive screen behind the stage, glowing in crisp white letters over a pitch-black background, the words appeared. The Jack Palmer Show exclusive. The new era of Eden. Phones were raised, people whispered, and somewhere in the crowd a sign read, "Don't mess this up, Jack." The lights dimmed. A heavy beat kicked in. Bass synth tension. Then came the voiceover, smooth and cocky. "She's the new name behind the bullet. He's the legend who started it all." Together for the first time, Sydney Sweeney and Keanu Reeves. This is not a reboot. This is war. The screen cut to black, then light. A spotlight burst open on center stage. Jack Palmer stepped into it with that signature grin. Too white, too wide, too rehearsed. Navy suit, black shoes polished to a mirror shine. He looked like a man who had prepared for this moment not with curiosity, but with ammunition. The crowd applauded, not quite cheering, more like testing the waters. He stood in silence for just a second, soaking it in. "Good evening," he said. "Tonight we are not here to promote a movie." Pause. Smile. "We're here to witness history, or depending on who you ask, the murder of it." Laughter, some amused, some uncertain. Jack began to pace. Eden, a man who buried grief with bullets, who built a myth out of silence and vengeance. A man who, and let's be honest, became a religion. He stopped, leaned in, and now he wears heels. Nervous laughter. Jack raised an eyebrow, riding the wave. "Ladies and gentlemen, she's here. She's armed, she's dangerous, and she's not Keanu Reeves. Please welcome Sydney Sweeney." The crowd lit up. Sydney walked onto the stage with quiet fire. All black, tailored, sleek, simple. No sparkle, no gloss, just presence. Her steps were measured, her smile controlled, but her eyes were sharp as glass. She shook Jack's hand briefly, no extra warmth. He gestured to the sleek leather couch. She sat. And of course, Jack continued, "We couldn't talk about Eden's future without paying our respects to its past." A beat. "You know him. You feared him. You probably considered getting a dog because of him. The man, the myth, the reason you lock your doors at night. Keanu Reeves." The audience erupted. Keanu walked on stage with the weight of silence. Dark blazer, worn jeans, black t-shirt. A small cross necklace peeked out from his collar. His face was calm, almost soft, but his posture never lied. He gave a small wave, then sat beside Sydney. Jack took a moment, looking between them. "Well," he said, "if a gunfight breaks out, I'm definitely not the one walking off this stage." Laughter. That one landed. Jack folded his hands, leaned back. "So the internet's broken. Fans are screaming. Critics are confused. And the big question everyone's asking, what happened to Eden?" He turned to Sydney. "Because from what I hear, he now shops at Prada." The room stiffened. Sydney smiled politely, nodding once. Jack smiled wider. "No, seriously. Is the Continental serving cocktails or contour tutorials now?" Laughter, this time more strained. Sydney adjusted the microphone. "There's still blood," she said. "Just better lighting." A few claps, a couple of chuckles. She held the moment well. But Jack wasn't finished. "Be honest," he said. "When they offered you the role, did you think, wow, me, the next Eden? Or did you think they must be running out of guys?" Sydney's smile didn't move. She looked at Jack. "I thought, finally, a chance to stop asking for permission." That landed hard. Scattered applause grew louder. Jack blinked, slightly thrown off. He pivoted. "But let's be fair. Eden is a legacy. It's not just guns and grit. It's Keanu." He turned to the man beside her. "Keanu, my man, you've played Wick for nearly a decade. And now you're watching someone else pull the trigger. What's that like?" Keanu didn't answer immediately. He rested his hands on his knees, looked at Jack, then at the audience, and then back to Jack. "Pain doesn't have a gender," he said. "And neither does vengeance." Silence, then applause. Heavy, honest, rising in waves. Jack chuckled, but his fingers twitched slightly. "So here, you're saying," he continued, "it's not about the suit or the scar, it's about the soul." Keanu nodded once. Jack leaned forward again, as if to whisper something scandalous. "So let me ask you this, and I say this with love. Are you training Sydney in gunplay, or just sitting back while your franchise becomes a fashion ad?" The audience murmured. Keanu didn't move. His voice was quieter this time. "Do you know why people feared Eden?" he asked. Jack blinked. It wasn't the guns. It wasn't the kills. It was what he carried. Every step, every shot. It was loss. He turned toward Sydney. "And that she understands." Sydney looked at him, and for the first time that night, something real flickered behind her calm. The room felt different now. But Jack smiled like nothing had changed. Okay, he said, raising his hands. "Let's not get sentimental. I'm just saying, this is a franchise that made masculinity sexy again. And now it's eyeliner and elegance." A few nervous laughs, mostly silence. Sydney didn't look at Jack this time, she looked at the camera. "Maybe it's time people realized," she said, "that strength doesn't always come with stubble." The audience roared. Jack tried to recover, standing slightly as if to break the tension. "Well, folks," he said, grinning wide, "if nothing else, the new Eden is going to be stylishly fatal." He turned back to Keanu. "Unless you plan to steal the show again, or maybe teach her how to brood in the rain." The smirk was back. Keanu tilted his head slightly, and just for a second that calm disappeared. What was left in its place wasn't anger. It was something colder, sharper. He didn't speak. He just looked. And in that silence, the room held still. The audience shifted in their seats. Jack didn't know it yet, but something had cracked. Sydney reached for her mic, smiling tightly. composed, but distant. Keanu's eyes locked onto Jack. No more warmth, no more amusement, just presence. The crowd could feel it. This interview wasn't going to follow the script. Jack sat back, legs crossed, eyes gleaming. The crowd had started to settle, but the air still buzzed with the aftershock of Keanu's silence. Jack could feel it. The tension, the curiosity, the edge. He smiled. Okay, he said, raising his hand slightly. Let's reset the mood, no need to shoot anyone yet. Scattered laughter. Jack turned to Sydney. Let me just ask though, and this comes from love, he said with mock sincerity. Do you really think the Eden fan base is ready for lip gloss and slow-mo gunfights set to Billie Eilish? A few people in the audience laughed, but the sound was thin. A couple of women in the front row exchanged glances, raised eyebrows, tight lips. Sydney didn't blink. I think they'll be ready for precision, she said, and a clean kill. Jack chuckled, trying to keep it light. So no bubble baths between assassinations? Sydney smiled, but her voice was iron. You're confusing femininity with fragility. That's your problem, not mine. A ripple moved through the room. Jack hesitated. Not long, just enough. Then he leaned forward, elbows on knees. All right. Real question. He dropped the fake grin for a moment, let himself sound genuine. You're stepping into a franchise built on a very specific kind of energy. Brutal, minimal, hyper-masculine. Are you not worried that putting a woman at the center of it might dilute that? Silence. Even the audience froze. Sydney stared at him for a second. She didn't look angry. She looked surgical. The only thing that dilutes a story, she said, is when it stops evolving. Jack opened his mouth, but she kept going. And maybe the problem isn't a woman taking the lead. Maybe the problem is some people thinking that violence only has value when it's delivered by a man. The crowd responded, stronger now. Applause, a few cheers. Jack forced a laugh. His fingers tapped the cue cards in his lap. He looked at Keanu. Keanu, he said, his voice lighter. Help me out here. Isn't there something off about all this? Wick was a man of focus, determination, rage. He pointed at Sydney with an open palm. And now it's all cheekbones in slow motion. Doesn't that feel, I don't know, like parody? Keanu didn't answer right away. He looked down, then back up. There was no smile this time. No, he said simply. Jack raised his eyebrows. That's it? Keanu shrugged. You talk a lot about violence, he said, but you don't seem to understand what drives it. Jack leaned back, pretending to be intrigued. Oh, please enlighten me. Keanu looked at him, unblinking. Loss, grief, being told you don't belong in your own story. He glanced at Sydney. And if you think only men carry that, you haven't been paying attention. The applause came harder this time, louder, real. A woman in the second row clapped first, then the rest followed. Jack kept smiling, but his shoulders tensed. Okay, he said, laughing it off. Now we're getting deep. He shuffled the cards in his hand like a magician preparing a trick. Let's go back, he said, aiming for humor again, to the very beginning. You know, I read somewhere that when Sydney got the call for the role, she was in the middle of a spa weekend. Is that true? Sydney turned her head slowly toward him. "No," she said. "I was training 6 hours a day." Jack blinked. "Oh, so not a mani-pedi montage then?" Silence. Sydney leaned in. "If I were a man, would you ask if I got the role in the middle of a beer and a football game?" The audience exhaled like a punch had landed. Jack opened his mouth, but Keanu spoke first. "She trained harder than anyone I've seen," he said, voice even, "including me." Jack looked between the two. He could feel the walls closing in, not from a fight, but from something worse. Conviction. He tried one more jab. Jack looked between the two. He could feel the walls closing in, not from a fight, but from something worse. Conviction. He tried one more jab.
"Well," he said, grinning, "at least you can admit you're passing the baton, right?" Then he turned almost playfully and aimed it straight at Keanu. "You're basically the mentor now. Doesn't it feel weird? Sitting there watching the Eden franchise become not about you."
Keanu didn't flinch. His jaw set, his hands folded. The pause before he spoke was just long enough to make Jack sweat. Keanu leaned forward slowly. His voice didn't rise. It got quieter, but it carried. "You think this is about being the center?" He looked Jack in the eyes. "It's never been about that." The studio was dead silent. Jack opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Something had shifted. Keanu sat forward slowly, elbows resting on his knees, hands calmly clasped. His voice was quiet. No show, no drama. Just wait. "What made Eden legendary," he said, "was never his gender. It was the pain, the discipline, the silence, the code." He looked at Jack. "And Sydney carries that, all of it." The crowd reacted instantly. Applause, murmurs, people nodding. Jack let out a forced chuckle, trying to shake off the sting. "All right," he said. "Okay, so now Wick's a woman, carries pain, rage, and a great contour line." He grinned. "Sydney, tell me, is the kill count lower now because you're multitasking between gunfights and skincare tutorials?" The laughter this time was awkward. Fewer laughs, more eye rolls. The studio's atmosphere tightened again, not from excitement, but from collective discomfort. Sydney didn't take the bait. "I didn't take this role to prove anything to you," she said, "or to anyone who thinks femininity is a punchline." Jack raised a hand in mock surrender. "Whoa, relax, it's just jokes." Keanu leaned back now, slower, letting the silence stretch. Then he looked at Jack with something new behind his eyes. Not anger, just exposure. "Maybe that's the problem," Keanu said. "Some people only know how to hide behind jokes." The crowd stilled. Jack blinked. The grin faltered for a half second. "Careful, Keanu," he said, voice tighter. "Don't go all monk on me. This is still entertainment." Keanu tilted his head slightly. "Right. And you're still trying to turn discomfort into a punchline." Jack looked down at his cue cards, but the words felt smaller now. He flipped to the next one, smiled. "Let's talk emotion, since that's apparently the new ammo in Wick's world." He looked at Sydney, then back to Keanu. "You really think people want a Wick story about feelings? What's next, grief counseling and bullet time?" Sydney crossed her legs slowly, almost like she was grounding herself. Keanu answered, "No, they want to see truth. They just don't expect it to look like her." That line hit like a bullet without sound. The audience erupted into claps. A man in the back stood up briefly and raised a fist before sitting again. Jack tried to pivot. Okay, so Wick's not just blood and bullets anymore. He's introspection too. He forced a laugh. I gotta admit, this version feels like a TED Talk with silencers. Keanu didn't laugh. He smiled, but not kindly. Maybe what scares you, he said, is the idea of seeing emotion where you only ever saw pose. Jack blinked. For the first time, he had no comeback, no punchline. The crowd was silent. It was like the power in the room had shifted hands, and Jack didn't even notice it leaving. He tried again. Well, he muttered, you two are certainly intense. Keanu leaned back into his seat, crossing one leg over the other. We didn't come here to entertain you, he said. We came here to represent something that matters. Sydney didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her presence, her stillness. It was more than enough. Jack shuffled his notes again. He was off rhythm, losing control, and he knew it. So he changed strategy, dropped the jokes, went for something personal. He turned towards Sydney, voice slower now, low. You've come a long way, he said. From Havana to Hollywood. That's a movie in itself. Sydney didn't respond. Jack continued, almost too casual. Tell me, how many producers did you have to kill to get this role? The audience froze. No laughter. Just oxygen leaving the room. Sydney sat still. Her fingers gripped the edge of the couch just for a second. Then she looked at him. Calm. Dead calm. I didn't have to kill anyone, she said. I just had to work twice as hard. But you wouldn't understand that. The audience stood. A standing ovation. Jack forced a laugh, but his smile cracked. For the first time that night, he didn't look amused. He looked exposed. And Keanu? He didn't even blink. The studio was quiet. The kind of quiet that vibrates. Jack shifted in his seat. He tried to smile again, but something had changed. His tone was still light, but his eyes had hardened. There was something calculated now. Desperate, even. Look, he said, chuckling dryly. I didn't mean anything by it. I just think your journey is wild. He leaned back. Havana to Hollywood. From Spanish soap operas to shooting stunt doubles in the face. It's impressive. I mean, seriously, who do you thank for that? Your agent? Your accent? Murmurs rippled across the audience. Sydney didn't move, didn't blink. Jack wasn't finished. I mean, you were cleaning houses in Cuba, right? Now you're out here cleaning out movie roles. He laughed, as if expecting the audience to follow. They didn't. A few gasps, a cough, silence. The camera cut to a woman in the front row. Her arms were crossed, jaw clenched. Sydney looked down for a second. Then she lifted her head and spoke. Voice low, steady. I was cleaning houses. Yes. I was also memorizing scripts between shifts. Jack shifted. I walked into auditions with the wrong shoes and the wrong accent. I got rejected more times than you've told jokes tonight. And I kept going. The crowd stirred. Sydney kept going, voice unwavering. What scares you isn't my accent, Jack. It's the fact that a woman with it made it here without your permission. The applause came like thunder. It started with one person, then spread. clapping, whistling, a standing ovation from the left side of the audience. Keanu stayed seated, calm, but he was clapping too. Jack sat frozen. His grin was stiff now, mechanical. "Wow," he said. "So we're playing the dignity card now." He turned toward the audience like a stand-up comedian losing his crowd. "Guys, come on. It's not like I'm the bad guy here." Silence. Then he turned sharply toward Keanu. "Okay, you've been quiet, Reeves, but let's be real. You're not the face of this franchise anymore. You're what? The Obi-Wan now? The wise old ghost?" He smirked. "Doesn't it sting watching someone else take your spotlight?" Keanu didn't answer. Not at first. He exhaled slowly, eyes closed, then opened them. And when he spoke, it was with the weight of someone who'd seen too much to care about ego. "You ever see a torch pass from one hand to another?" Jack hesitated. "Sure." Keanu tilted his head. "Ever see someone say the flame lost value just because it's in a different hand?" That line hit hard. The audience exploded. People stood, clapped, some even shouted. It was the kind of moment that lived beyond the show. The kind that would be quoted, clipped, turned into fan art and tweets. Sydney looked at Keanu, not smiling. But there was something in her eyes. Recognition, respect. Jack laughed nervously, looking down at his notes. Anything to regain control. "Okay, that was poetic," he muttered. "Real Zenwick of you." He flipped the page, changed his tone. "Let's talk about relevance." He turned toward Keanu again, voice softer now but laced with something sharp. "You're what? In your 50s? Still doing your own stunts?" Pause. "Isn't there a part of you that wonders if Hollywood has moved on from you, from this whole myth?" The words lingered in the air. Keanu sat still, unbothered, then smiled just a little. "You ever watch a sunset, Jack?" Jack blinked. "What?" Keanu nodded. "Doesn't make it less beautiful just because night's coming." Silence and then eruption. The crowd went wild. Jack stared, unable to answer. Sydney closed her eyes for a second, breathed in, and smiled softly. But Jack wasn't done. He had one more card. And this time, he was going after something deeper. Something sacred. Jack was smiling again. But this time it wasn't confidence, it was survival. The last few exchanges had left him bleeding, but still breathing. He was losing the audience, and worse, the momentum. His eyes flicked from Sydney to Keanu and back again. He needed to reassert control. Fast. He went quiet, let the silence stretch just enough to feel intentional. Then, casually, almost friendly, he spoke. "You know what I've always admired about you, Keanu?" Keanu didn't answer. He just looked. "You don't chase relevance," Jack said. "You don't post your lunch on Instagram. You don't start drama." He leaned forward, elbows on knees. "But let's be honest. In this business, if you're not the center of attention, you're background noise. And now you're sitting on the couch while someone else holds the gun." He smiled. "Isn't that a little tragic?" Keanu blinked once. "You're still here, but the story moved on." Another beat. The audience shifted. Tension crawled back in, not from Jack's words, but from what they revealed. His desperation. Keanu didn't take long to respond. "No," he said simply. "It's not tragic." Jack raised his eyebrows. "No, it's necessary." The crowd hushed. Keanu continued, voice steady, grounded. "There's a difference between fading and stepping aside. One is fear, the other is choice." He looked at Sydney, then back at Jack. "And I chose." That hit like a punch. Jack chuckled, leaning back like it didn't matter. "So you're the wise elder now? A living tribute? Cool." He waved a hand toward the audience. "But let's be real. The internet moves fast this generation. They don't remember actors. They remember moments, memes, noise. You're a sunset. Beautiful, yeah, but fading." He smirked. "When the light's gone, what's left?" Keanu's smile returned. Subtle, reflective. "You ever light a fire, Jack?" Jack hesitated. "Yeah." "Then you know," Keanu said, "that a flame can spread without burning out, if it's passed right." The audience clapped again, harder, longer. Jack forced a grin. "But you're passing it, let's not forget that." Keanu nodded. "And proud of it." "But aren't you afraid," Jack asked, voice lower now, "that one day this chair will be empty? That the name Keanu Reeves will be just a reference?" Keanu looked at him, still quiet. Then he spoke. "You only worry about being forgotten," he said, "when you know you never gave anyone a reason to remember you." Silence. Jack's lips parted, but no words came. Sydney stared at Keanu, and then gently she nodded. The audience stood, clapping, cheering, some with tears in their eyes. Jack sat back, for the first time, unsure of who he was on his own show. The crowd was still standing. Jack wasn't. He sat slouched, legs uncrossed now, the cards in his hand slightly bent at the corners. His smile, or what remained of it, was now a mask, cracked at the edges. But he wasn't done. Not yet. He glanced at Keanu's neck at the chain, a small silver cross barely visible beneath his black shirt. And there it was, the angle, the one thing left untouched. He straightened up, tapped his fingers on the arm of the chair, then leaned forward, voice light but dipped in condescension. "You still wear that cross, huh?" Keanu didn't react. Jack tilted his head, squinting slightly. "Didn't think there was room for that kind of thing in Hollywood anymore. Faith, spirituality, all that old soul stuff." A few uneasy laughs. Sydney stiffened slightly beside Keanu, her hand resting on her lap, unmoving but tense. Jack went on. "I mean, come on. Aren't you worried it makes you look a little outdated? Like a guy clinging to beliefs while the world moved on?" Still no response. Jack pushed a little further. "Don't get me wrong, it's sweet, really. But you're the guy who reloads clips with one hand. Now you're preaching about meaning?" He grinned. "Feels like a different kind of fiction." Keanu's hand moved, not abruptly, just slowly. He reached up and touched the cross gently with his fingers, not to show it, but to feel it. Then he looked up, calm, clear. "The cross doesn't make me old," he said. "It reminds me I survived." Silence. He kept going. "I wore this long before cameras followed me, before premieres, before Wick. It wasn't part of a brand. It was what kept me standing when fame couldn't. Sydney glanced sideways at him, her eyes soft now but proud. Jack opened his mouth, trying to bring it back to irony. "But do you really think?" Keanu cut him off. "I don't think," he said. "I know." His voice dropped lower, not angry, just grounded. "This isn't about religion. It's about remembering that we're not everything." He turned to the audience. "Now, fame inflates, ego lies. But when you lose someone, when you fall apart in the dark, you don't look for applause, you look for something to hold on to." The studio went still. Even the light seemed quieter. A camera slowly zoomed in on the cross. Just a flicker of silver. Nothing flashy, nothing loud, just present. Keanu looked back at Jack. "I don't wear it to prove anything. I wear it so I don't forget." The crowd erupted, but this time the applause wasn't loud, it was deep. People didn't just clap, they felt it. Some stood, others sat with hands clasped. A man in the back wiped his eyes. A young woman whispered something to her friend, who nodded, stunned. Jack said nothing. For once. Nothing. Until... "So when it's all over," he said, his voice suddenly quieter, more bitter. "When the lights go out, when no one remembers Keanu Reeves or Sydney Sweeney, what happens then?" Keanu didn't respond right away. He looked at Jack and then slowly he smiled. Not smug, not dramatic, just calm. The kind of calm that comes after truth has already won. The question hung in the air like smoke. When it's all over, when no one remembers Keanu Reeves or Sydney Sweeney, what happens then? The audience was silent. Even the cameras, still rolling, seemed to hesitate. The entire studio had gone weightless, like time had been paused, waiting for someone to breathe first. Keanu looked at Jack. No anger, no defense, just a quiet clarity. He leaned forward slightly, folding his hands, and then, with a voice that didn't ask to be heard but had to be, he answered, "The question was never what they'll remember about me." Pause. "The real question is what they'll remember about you." Silence, no reaction, no defense. Jack blinked. His lips parted slightly, but nothing came. The words settled over him like dust. Soft, but heavy. The audience didn't erupt. Not at first. They stood, one by one. No cheers, no whistles. Just silence. But a silence charged with meaning, with respect. A kind of reverence usually reserved for endings, not of shows, but of eras. Sydney stood beside Keanu. She didn't look at Jack. She looked out at the crowd. Then she picked up her mic. Her voice was steady, clean, clear. Being the protagonist isn't about gender. She scanned the room. It's about courage. A pause. Then came the sound. Applause. Deep, unified, earned. Jack didn't move. He looked down at his cue cards, now bent, wrinkled, forgotten in his hands. For the first time that night, he looked human. And maybe that was the real twist. The man who made a living making others uncomfortable had finally met something he couldn't deflect. Truth. The screen faded slowly. The lights dimmed. There was no closing monologue, no final joke, no outro music. Just the echo of what had been said. White text fades in, one line at a time. It's not about fame. It's not about who speaks louder. It's about the courage to speak last when it matters most.